It is Thursday, November 13th, and major political corruption exposed in the state of California inside the Gavin Newsom administration. 5 people arrested, including Newsom's former chief of staff, his long-term former chief of staff. That's the most powerful person in state government other than Newsom himself. Also, California capitulating yesterday, canceling 17,000 commercial driver's licenses issued to illegal drivers, and brand new deportation numbers released. We're going to show you that real, actual progress.
Excuse us.
Do you have anything to say?
Any comments?
Should other California officials and people involved in the government be concerned now with this investigation underway?
Do you have any comment, Ms. Williamson?
Excuse us.
No, you guys can contact my attorney.
Excuse us.
Do you have anything to say at all?
Ms. Williamson, do you have anything to say to Javier Becerra right now? He called this a
Have you
gut
been
punch.
cooperating with prosecutors?
Ms. Williamson, you have nothing to say with the 23 counts against you, alleging that
Side of the story you would like
you
to
and
share with
co-conspirators funneled money to Javier Becerra.
Watch out for your steps.
Steps.
So Gavin Newsom, fresh off his trip from Brazil, sipping mojitos on the beach in Sao Paulo, being wined and dined, leaving the third world country he created in California to go criticize President Trump in Brazil, calling Trump an abomination yesterday. The most corrupt administration in American history. Really? Is that so, Gavin? Because while you were saying that, at the same time those words were coming out of your mouth, your long-time former chief of staff was arrested, charged, indicted by a federal grand jury on 23 charges related to public corruption, real corruption, folks, old school political corruption, accused of committing bank fraud, wire fraud, defrauding the government, obstructing justice, filing false tax returns, and lying to federal investigators.
Former chief of staff to the California governor, top Democrat Gavin Newsom, is set to appear in court tonight after being indicted on public corruption charges. According to prosecutors, Dana Williamson diverted something like $225,000 from an inactive political campaign to an associate's personal use from 2022 to 2024, which is right around the same time she worked for the governor. Prosecutors also say she claimed more than $1 million in business deductions for things like traveling on private planes, luxury hotel stays, home furnishings, designer handbags, and more. A spokesperson for Governor Newsom tells us in a statement Williamson is no longer serving in his administration and that the governor expects all public servants to uphold the highest standards of integrity. Our Chief Justice correspondent Kelly O'Donnell is following this one for us. Kelly, what's going on here? What do we know and how did this develop?
Well, this looks like kind of old-fashioned political corruption allegations, where Dana Williamson is among 5 people who are accused of funneling money from what was a dormant political campaign account, and we don't know which candidate is associated with that, and doing things like paying expenses, giving one of the co-conspirators a no-show job where a spouse gets paid, but there's no work involved. She has not worked for Governor Newsom since last year, but obviously there are political overtones, and obviously his picture is what we see on camera, and so he will have to some degree, answer for these issues. But this investigation began 3 years ago, so it is not of just this moment with the Trump administration or the DOJ. So it's been going on for a long time.
Just to be clear, this is the equivalent of Susie Wiles in the Trump administration or Stephen Miller being arrested for this kind of public corruption. According to the charges, Williamson allegedly helped divert about $225,000 in funds from a dormant political campaign to an associate's personal account using a money laundering scheme to fund no-show jobs between February 2022 and September 2024. That was last year. And she worked for Gavin much longer than that. This was going on up until last year when Newsom was clearly tipped off by the Biden DOJ that his most senior administration official was allegedly a crook. Here's the DOJ's official announcement accusing her of backdating contracts to thwart the FBI's investigation into paycheck protection loans made to a business that she owned. They say she also allegedly filed false tax returns deducting luxury purchases of home goods and handbags, as well as private jet flights. This lady Dana Williamson, she ran Newsom's administration for years, folks, until she was replaced in December of last year. That's less than a year ago. Newsom's office putting out a statement responding to this indictment saying Ms. Williamson no longer serves in this administration. While we are still learning of the details of the allegations, the governor expects all public servants to uphold the highest standards of integrity, urging patience as the charges play out. Also adding that at the time when the president's openly calling for his attorney general to investigate his political enemies, it's especially important to honor the American principle of being innocent until proven guilty in a court of law by a jury of one's peers. Yeah, a bit ironic considering all your rhetoric about the Trump administration being the most corrupt in the nation's history, while your chief of staff, Gavin, is facing real old school corruption charges, real political corruption, old school political corruption, doing so under your nose, allegedly, for years. Or were you aware this kind of behavior was persistent in your administration? She's facing up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine each for each wire fraud and conspiracy charge, as well as up to 5 years in prison and fines for the conspiracy to obstruct justice and false statement counts. Meanwhile, California capitulating yesterday, canceling 17,000 CDLs following a federal audit. That's commercial driver's licenses. The California Department of Motor Vehicles has just canceled 17,000 non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses following a federal audit of the state's CDL program, according to the Department of Transportation. Secretary Sean Duffy releasing this statement yesterday, asserting that California officials admitted to illegally issuing the CDLs to dangerous foreign drivers. That's a close quote, folks. And that the DMV sent notices to the license holders that their licenses no longer meet federal requirements and will expire automatically in 60 days. And good riddance. Duffy saying, after weeks of claiming they did nothing wrong, Gavin Newsom and California have now been caught red-handed, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. My team will continue to force California to prove they have removed every illegal immigrant from behind the wheel of semi-trucks and school buses. Look, it's against the law for any illegal alien to receive a driver's license, and all of this blowing up after those dozens of fatal CDL and tractor-trailer accidents in recent months from California, Illinois, New York drivers who were in the country illegally and completely ill-prepared to handle those big rigs, just not knowing how to really drive those trucks. It was just awful scenes if you saw some of the videos from those incidents. One of the drivers was arrested by ICE who say received his CDL from New York State with the name on the license reading "no name given." You can't make this up. You could see a copy of that right here. Look at this. No name given on the driver's license. What in the world is this about? Watch.
You know, Director Lyons, I saw something that startled me. That was ICE arresting an Indian national, an illegal alien operating an 18-wheeler in Oklahoma. And you can see on your screen now, he was carrying a New York State issued commercial driver's license that could also be used as a real ID. His first name was listed as, quote, no name given. That's literally a real ID he was arrested with. Meanwhile, ICE has arrested at least 91 illegals operating commercial vehicles following that deadly crash back in August in Florida. That was also an Indian national. Fortunately, in this latest no-name case, no one lost their life, but this has got to give a lot of pause and concern for people that we have a lot of illegal aliens out there that shouldn't be behind commercial vehicles.
Yeah, it's really scary, Griff. And, like you said, to see that on a driver's license issued by a state, no name given, and the worst part, there's a real ID star right up there in the corner. I don't know about you all, but it was like going through a security clearance for me to get my real ID. So I can't believe that we're giving illegal aliens who have no right to be here these driver's licenses. You have these sanctuary states that want to go ahead and try to just make it welcoming for these people that we don't know who they are. And again, these are CDL licenses. These people are transporting hazardous goods, materials at times. And in some cases, we don't know exactly what they're doing. And look how many American citizens have lost their lives because of individuals like that have these driver's licenses.
How is that possible? I recently renewed my license, and it was a nightmare. It took 3 separate trips to the DMV. My birth certificate, they said, wasn't clear enough in one of the trips. Another time, they made me wait until my new license arrived before I could go back with the physical copy and pay for the enhanced driver's license. Yet they just seem to hand out Class A and CDL licenses to illegals. It's terrifying. And what do you think is the reason for that, right? Like, why are they doing this? Why have they been doing this? What do they get out of it? Is it really just about diversity and inclusion? Could that really be the only reason for it? In another story, the immigrant population in the U.S. has successfully dropped for the first time in decades. An analysis of census data by the Pew Research Center finding that between January and June 2025, so 5 months ago, the foreign-born population declined by nearly 1.5 million people, already 1.5 million in just the first 6 months of Trump's administration. That's a lot, 1.5 million, still far from the 10-plus million Biden allowed to illegally come into the country between 2021 through 2025.
President Trump's stepped-up immigration policies appear to be impacting the nation's labor force. Preliminary data shows that more than 1 million immigrants disappeared from the labor force from January through the end of July. Immigrants make up almost 20% of the U.S. workforce. Data showing that 45% of workers in farming, fishing, and forestry are immigrants. They also represent 30% of all construction workers. This comes as the U.S. sees its first decline in the overall immigrant population in over 50 years.
Democrats now arguing that this hasn't helped anyone at all, hasn't helped Americans whatsoever, that it hasn't solved the real problems facing Americans on a daily basis. But is that the case? Is that true? No, it's not. In fact, during the Biden administration, all net job growth in this country went to foreign-born workers. American-born workers lost jobs over that same time frame. So this does help solve that problem. Americans no longer have to compete with workers who are happy accepting these basement bargain wages, not to mention crime, right? And all the other elements that come from that, trafficking, drugs, etc. DHS releasing the most up-to-date numbers yesterday with it, including this chart showing the size of the foreign-born population growing dramatically after January 2021 when Biden was first inaugurated. But since January of this year, 2025, it's declined by now 2.2 million. That number from the New York Times a minute ago, that was, again, from June of this year. Well, DHS says the current number is 2.2 million, which means Trump's already removed 20%, 1/5, the illegals that entered under Joe Biden. That's a job well done. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.